They thought we were the villains. That's what happens when a con artist wears a smile better than a badge. It started with overgrown grass. It ended with federal arrests and a neighborhood unraveling like a cheap suburban illusion. The truth? My family didn't just move to Maple Street. We were drawn here by a woman who had waited 25 years to destroy us. She nearly did. But what she didn't know, what she never calculated, was this. You don't bring war to a family of federal agents and expect to walk away clean. Saturday morning, the kind where the air is still cool, birds chirp like they're on contract, and the smell of overpriced coffee lingers on every porch. Maple Street was alive with curiosity, curtains twitching, phones recording, whispers being traded like currency. 15 neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, some in folding chairs, others with lukewarm Starbucks, and that unmistakable suburban gleam in their eyes, the one people get when they think they're about to witness someone else's life unravel. Front and center, Karen Walsh, steel gray yoga pants, clipboard like a gavel, lipstick just dark enough to feel aggressive. In that smile, that smug, orchestrated grin, the kind you wear when you think justice is about to kneel at your feet. "They're inside," she told the responding officer, voice loud enough to echo down driveways. Documented impersonation of federal personnel. I have evidence, witness statements, and time-stamped surveillance. They've been using fake credentials to intimidate residents. The officer badge read Davis didn't flinch. Young, but you could tell he had enough hours under his belt to recognize when a situation was about to go sideways. He took the file from her hands, thick with printed social media posts, annotated screenshots, and what she called community incident logs. Karen glanced over her shoulder at the crowd and smiled like a politician who knew the cameras were rolling. Inside our house, we were ready. My father, Frank Miller, 68, retired pressed khakis, steady hands, stood by the dining table laying out documents like chess pieces. 30 years in the bureau, commendations, pension records, service files with the kind of clearance levels most people only whisper about. To the neighbors, he was the sweet old man with tomato plants and a perfect lawn. To the United States government, he was the closer. Beside him, I was checking my own badge. As Special Agent John Miller, Financial Crimes Division, active. No aliases, no front. Just the job. Just the truth. Sam, my 12-year-old son, stood near the window, eyes wide behind the curtains. He knew something was wrong, but not just how wrong. Not yet. When the knock came, we didn't wait. Dad stepped out first. Calm. Controlled. Like a man walking into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. "Good morning, officer," he said, holding out his credentials with the quiet authority that made grown men confess. "I understand there's been some confusion about my family's identity." Officer Davis scanned the papers. His brow tightened. His eyes moved fast, recognition surfacing like a current beneath still water. "Victor Frank Miller," he read aloud. "Senior Special Agent, FBI, Financial Crimes Division, retired." He looked up. "Sir, are you the Frank Miller, the closer?" Frank gave a modest nod. "In another lifetime." A ripple moved through the crowd like a dropped stone. Phones lowered, coffee cups paused midair. Even Karen's jaw stuttered. Before anyone could speak, I stepped out. "Special Agent John Miller," I said clearly. "Active duty, badge 4472. You're welcome to verify through Agent Helen Collins at Quantico." Davis looked between us, between father and son, between the narrative he'd been fed and the truth unraveling in front of him. But Karen wasn't done. Her voice cracked like a whip. "They're lying. Those are fake. Anyone can print those papers." Davis held up a hand. "Ma'am, impersonating a federal officer is a federal crime. But so is filing a knowingly false police report." Then came the moment, the one that changed everything. Frank turned slightly, eyes locked on Karen. "Officer," he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard, "this woman's real name is Linda Ross. 25 years ago, I put her behind bars for embezzling over $2 million from pediatric cancer research funds. She swore in court she'd make me pay." Karen's face broke. Not surprise, not denial. Recognition, then fury. "You destroyed everything," she screamed. "You think you can live quietly after what you did to me? I built this life. I earned this trust. I ran this community. And you used it. I said, stepping forward, to stage a personal vendetta and turn an entire neighborhood into your weapon. Officer Davis reached for his cuffs. Linda Ross, you're under arrest for harassment of federal officers, false reporting, and parole violation. But as he cuffed her, she leaned toward Frank. Her voice dropped to a whisper, just loud enough for me to hear too. You think this is over? You think 25 years of planning ends with a pair of handcuffs? Ask yourself one thing, Frank. She smiled as Davis opened the cruiser door. Why do you think I picked the house next to yours? The car door closed, and just like that, Karen Walsh was gone. But her war? That was just beginning. The day after Linda was taken away in cuffs, Maple Street looked normal. Todo normal. Sprinklers ticked across identical green lawns. Mailboxes stood at attention. Dogs barked at squirrels like nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, you could feel it. A tightness in the air, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. My dad stood at the edge of our driveway that morning, coffee in hand, watching the empty house across the street. His shoulders looked straight, his stance familiar. But there was a stiffness in the way he sipped, measured, almost bracing. She left it clean, he muttered, nodding toward Karen's front yard. Like she knew she wouldn't be coming back. I joined him, arms crossed. People still think we staged all this. He didn't respond right away, just sipped again. Guilt, he finally said. It's quieter than anger, but it lingers longer. By noon, the whispers had returned. Betty stopped by with muffins and too many apologies. Tom, the guy who'd brought a lawn chair to our fake arrest, waved from his porch with a sheepish nod. Most people didn't know what to say. Some avoided us entirely. I didn't blame them. Linda Ross hadn't just fooled a neighborhood, she'd manipulated an entire social ecosystem. The HOA was her theater. We were her main act. And now, with her gone, no one knew what to believe anymore. The strange thing? We almost missed the simplicity of her rage. At least when she was screaming, you knew what she wanted. But now it was silence. And the silence was dangerous. That afternoon, I sat in the study going through the HOA records Linda had left behind, files Betty had handed over with trembling hands. What I found wasn't just bureaucracy, it was infrastructure. Linda had created a system of control layers of fines, enforcement schedules, backdated citations, surveillance logs. Her influence extended far beyond neighborhood aesthetics. She didn't run the HOA. She weaponized it. And something else became painfully clear as I dug deeper. Linda had access to data, a lot of it. Bank drafts from elderly residents. Automated payment setups for people too trusting or too distracted to read the fine print. There were gaps in those ledgers. Holes that didn't make sense unless you were laundering money through community improvement fees. Dad, I called, as he stepped in from the back garden. She wasn't just after revenge, she was funding it. He sat beside me, glancing over the spreadsheets. She used our neighborhood like a front, he muttered, just like she did 25 years ago. Clean face, dirty books. And she didn't do it alone, I said. That realization settled between us like a cold fog. For Linda to pull this off, multiple HOA scams across states, coordinated misinformation, tracking my federal ID, she needed support. Not just locals, operatives, people who knew how to stay invisible. Which brought us back to one uncomfortable truth. If Linda was this calculated in selecting us, there's no way she picked this neighborhood at random. Do you think? I hesitated. Do you think she planted anything? Here, in the house? Dad didn't answer. He just looked up, slowly turning toward the basement door. I followed his gaze. The basement. Always locked. Always avoided. Linda's final words still echoed in my head. Check your basement. The door creaked as we opened it. A puff of cold air rose up like breath from a buried mouth. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like an agent. I felt like prey. Because when someone like Linda Ross goes silent, that's when you know the storm hasn't passed. It's only just begun. The basement smelled like time. Not the musty scent of mold or dust, but the colder, sharper kind. The kind of air that's been undisturbed for too long, like secrets sealed beneath floorboards. Dad flipped the light switch. Nothing. We exchanged a glance. He handed me the flashlight from the workbench near the door, and I led the way down the creaking stairs. Sam stayed upstairs silent, watching, knowing better than to ask this time. The beam cut across old holiday boxes, garden tools, and rows of carefully stacked files. But it wasn't until we reached the far wall, the part no one ever used, that we saw it. A section of drywall had been removed. Clean cuts, not vandalism, intentional. Behind it, wedged into the exposed studs, was a black plastic document tube sealed with heavy-duty tape. On it, a label written in red marker. Miller file, stage 3. I turned to Dad. His face was stone. "You recognize it?" I asked. He gave a slow nod. "Federal case file storage format. Modified, but old school. We used tubes like these for classified exhibits before digital protocols took over." I broke the seal and opened the cap. Inside, a flash drive, encrypted, no brand, no markings. We didn't speak as we climbed back upstairs and plugged it into a standalone laptop. Dad killed the Wi-Fi. Air-gapped. Clean machine. The folder contained exactly 3 files. A video titled "To Frank," a PDF labeled "Maple Assets," and a text file. Directive 1, trigger after arrest. Dad clicked the video first. It opened with Linda's face, but not the one our neighbors knew. No tight smile, no filtered grace, just raw intent. "Hello, Frank," she began, voice flat and surgical. "If you're watching this, I assume your self-righteous Boy Scout moral code finally got me caged again. Congratulations, you're still predictable." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes colder than any courtroom testimony I'd ever seen. "But let me be clear. This neighborhood was never about your family. Not really. It was a test site. A stage. You were bait to attract the others." She smiled small, almost maternal. "And that's what made it worse. I didn't spend 15 years in prison sulking, Frank. I studied human behavior, systems, the way compliance creates blindness. You taught me that. You thought you broke me, but you forged me." The video cut off. Silence. Dad didn't move. He was staring at the screen like he was trying to punch through it with thought alone. We opened the PDF next. It was a ledger. Not HOA fees or fines. Something deeper. Maple Assets wasn't about property, it was about people. Names, addresses, personal income data, marital histories, medical details, even psychological profiles. Karen Linda had compiled behavioral dossiers on over 40 families in Maple Street. And not just from public records. These were surveillance-level profiles. "She knew everything," I muttered. She was building psychological maps, predicting who would comply, who would resist, who could be bought. "She was running Maple like a soft lab," Dad whispered. Then came the worst part. Directive it. Trigger after arrest. It wasn't a message. It was a script. Pre-written emails, documents, false whistleblower tips, allegations against Dad and me ranging from corruption to abuse of power, ready to send to Internal Affairs, DOJ, media outlets. All she needed was her arrest to set it off. The moment she lost control publicly, she'd planned to detonate her final act from within our own system. "She built a dead man's switch," I said. "Arrest her and the machine runs itself." That's when Sam came into the room, holding a small torn envelope. "It was inside the mailbox, no stamp," he said. "Just this." The note inside was typed. "You triggered the wrong protocol, Agent Miller. Stage 3 was mercy. Stage 4 will be systemic. See you on the broadcast." No signature, just a link to a live stream timer. 26 hours left. The countdown was ticking. 35 hours, 57 minutes, 43 seconds. It sat on the corner of my desktop like a lit fuse, humming with anticipation. Linda Ross hadn't just planned revenge, she'd automated it. The livestream link led to a blank page with a timer, no video feed, no metadata, no location. Just digital dread waiting to become public. Dad leaned over my shoulder, jaw tight. "She's going to turn the whole system against us." I didn't respond. I was already parsing through the directive folder again. The documents were designed to bypass us, preloaded with fake allegations, falsified evidence of financial coercion, Anonymous testimonies from manipulated neighbors, edited surveillance footage made to suggest we'd abused federal authority. And the worst part? The evidence wasn't obviously fake. It was crafted to be plausible, just enough truth buried in enough lies to tie the noose and dare the system to pull. Linda didn't need to prove we were criminals. She just needed to make enough people wonder. We'd seen it before how a few seeds of doubt could metastasize into full-blown investigations. The Bureau didn't care if the allegations were true. They cared that someone had made them loud enough. She was always 5 moves ahead, Dad muttered, sitting back. Even her silence was strategy. We needed to move. Fast. I looped in my Bureau contact, Helen Collins, our supervising agent at Quantico. This is deep, she said after reviewing the files I forwarded. If any of this goes public, we'll be forced to suspend both of you pending investigation, especially if it looks like a cover-up. It's not a cover-up, I said tightly. It's a frame job. Doesn't matter, she replied. In the court of public opinion, perception is prosecution. Dad stood in the corner, quiet for a long beat. Then he said the 3 words I didn't expect. Reverse the play. I looked at him. What? She used our neighborhood as her weapon, he said. She manipulated perception, isolated the target, then saturated the narrative before the facts caught up. You want to flip her system against her? He nodded. She didn't just design a smear campaign. She designed a machine. But machines follow instructions. You just have to give them new ones. It was a long shot, but it was better than waiting to be discredited by software. So we started peeling back her infrastructure system by system. First, the neighborhood. We went door to door, not as agents, not as victims, but as neighbors. We showed them what Linda had collected on them: spreadsheets, personal emails, profiles based on therapy appointments, church attendance, even Amazon purchases. The shock was instant. A few cried. Most were horrified. She was tracking my husband's prescription refills, one woman whispered. She knew about our divorce before I told anyone, another murmured. The betrayal spread like blood in water. One by one, the people Linda had used began talking. Betty, the HOA treasurer, gave us the encrypted laptop Linda had gifted her for bookkeeping. Tom, the lawn chair spectator, handed over printed emails from Linda requesting intel on our daily routines. And Jennifer, the shy corner house mom, confessed that Linda had offered to waive her HOA dues in exchange for voice recordings of our backyard conversations. She said you were dangerous, Jennifer said through tears, that if I didn't help, my family could be next. Second, the platform. I traced the live stream link to a series of proxy servers bouncing across 3 countries. But deep in the metadata of the embedded script, I found something: an access token. Small, obscure, forgotten. It led to a hidden admin dashboard. Password protected. 4 layers of encryption. I looked at Dad. You taught her to build this, I said. And now I'll unbuild it. He sat down beside me. Fingers moved across keys like a man diffusing a mine he once designed. 30 minutes of silence later, he found it. Kill protocol, stage 4, delay loop. We can't stop the bomb, he said, but we can delay the detonation. I hit execute. The countdown froze. Paused at 18 hours, 13 minutes, and 22 seconds. Not diffused. Just waiting. And that's when I realized Linda wasn't trying to destroy us with truth or lies. She was trying to destroy us with uncertainty. Because in the end, the most powerful form of control isn't fear. It's doubt. The timer was frozen. But the neighborhood wasn't deep. Word had spread. Not just about the live stream, but about us. The Whisper Network was back in full operation. HOA group chats, garage side conversations, texts that ended in, "But don't tell anyone I said that." And then came the flyer. Neighborhood emergency meeting, Maple Street Community Hall. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Topic: federal impersonation and abuse of authority. All residents encouraged to attend. No organizer listed. No contact number. But the font, the formatting, the passive-aggressive professionalism? Linda's signature was all over it. She's launching phase 4 manually, Dad said, reading it under the kitchen light. We stalled her system, so now she's going analog. Which means it'll be nastier, I added, more human, more personal. Wednesday night came faster than we expected. By 6:45 p.m., the community hall was packed. Not just curious neighbors, but cameras. A local reporter stood by the snack table rehearsing lines. Someone had tipped off the press. At the center of it all, Betty, pale, nervous, holding a folder tight to her chest. She wasn't the host, but she'd been drafted into the role by absence. No one else wanted to moderate a conversation about federal scandal in a cul-de-sac. Tom stood near the back, Jennifer by the door. A few others looked uncomfortable. Most looked angry, confused, distrustful. They were here to watch something burn. I stood near the side wall with Dad beside me. Neither of us wore suits, no badges, no mention of the bureau. We were just John and Frank Miller, neighbors, residents, targeted men trying to stay 2 steps ahead of a woman playing chess with landmines. Then it began. Betty stepped up with a tremor in her voice. "Thank you all for coming. We've had some concerning developments regarding certain allegations." She didn't finish. The projector screen behind her came to life, synced to someone's laptop. A new voice filled the room. Linda's voice, pre-recorded, cold, sharp, scripted to destroy. "Neighbors," it began. "I wish I could be there in person, but the truth has never needed my presence to stand." The screen flickered to charts, movement, logs of our home, vehicle records, photos of me speaking to what she labeled unidentified government contacts. Then came the fake documents, mock pay stubs, falsified credentials, graphics that looked just credible enough to raise questions. "Ask yourself," Linda's voice continued, "who are the Millers really? Why does a retired man carry a secure filing cabinet? Why does his son disappear for weeks at a time and return with different vehicles? No business license, no public records of employment, only shadows." The room was dead quiet. No coughs, no shifting chairs. And then, the testimony, neighbors, faces we knew, clips cut from candid conversations. "Jennifer, they don't really talk to anyone. Tom, I don't know what he does. It's all very private. Tom," even Betty's voice lifted from a private phone call. "Sometimes I wonder if they're even who they say they are." Context stripped. Narrative twisted. Linda had taken the raw material of suburban doubt and turned it into a weapon. She didn't need a courtroom. She'd built a theater of public opinion. Dad stood straighter beside me. "We let her control the microphone." "Not anymore," I said. I walked to the front, past the stunned crowd. Betty looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to stop me or step aside. She chose the latter. I stood beneath Linda's still image, paused mid-smile, and spoke without notes. "My name is Special Agent John Miller, Financial Crimes Division, FBI. Badge number 4472. Verified and cleared. My father, retired Senior Special Agent Frank Miller, is standing right there." Gasps. A few murmurs. Someone dropped a cup. "And everything you just watched," I continued, "manipulated, fabricated, constructed by a woman convicted of embezzling $2 million from pediatric cancer funds. Her real name is Linda Ross, and she spent 25 years planning this." I paused, then raised a folder. "This is what she didn't show you." Inside, the Maple Assets file. Dossiers, bank drafts, OA surveillance, proof that they were the ones being watched, not us. I looked into their faces, their confusion, their shame. "You weren't just bystanders," I said. "You were her instruments, and it's time we take the power back." Silence. Then Betty stepped forward. "I have something to say." And just like that, the execution plan unraveled. Betty stepped forward like someone walking into gunfire, hands shaking, voice brittle. "Linda told me things about the Millers, about the community. She said we had a duty to protect our homes." She looked around the room. "But she never mentioned she was using our trust to mine our lives." She held up the encrypted HOA laptop. "I didn't know what this really was. I thought it was bookkeeping. It wasn't. It was surveillance." Whispers broke across the crowd. Not shock recognition. Pieces were falling into place. Tom raised his hand slowly. She asked me to watch when John left the house, told me he might be a threat, that if I cared about the kids in this neighborhood, I'd report back. Jennifer added, she said if I didn't cooperate, I could be liable if something happened. I didn't want to be involved. I didn't know how to say no. One by one, they confessed. Not crimes, but complicity. Linda hadn't built a conspiracy. She built a mirror, held it up to every fear people already had, and weaponized it. Dad stepped forward. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. He opened a manila folder marked Case File 117 Ross and laid it out on the table for anyone to read. Trial transcripts, court statements, financial records, photos of children's hospitals that had gone underfunded because Linda had rerouted millions into shell accounts in Belize. No speeches, no theatrics, just facts. I don't need you to like us, Dad said quietly. I just need you to understand who she is, who she's always been. Then came the sound we didn't expect. Clapping. It started slow, Betty, then Tom, then the woman from Lot 8, and then the room followed. Not in a cheer, not in celebration, but in solemn unity. Not for us, for clarity. For the first time, the fog was lifting. Then the door opened, and Officer Davis stepped in. There's been a breach, he said. You'll want to come with me. We followed him outside. A patrol car sat parked near Linda's now abandoned home. The garage door was open. Inside, pinned across corkboards and drywall, was everything. Blueprints of the neighborhood, financial graphs, ID badges from neighbors, printouts of personal social media, old surveillance photos from the 92nd of my father in court of Linda in orange, staring daggers into the lens. And at the center of it all, a framed photo of our house. A red string connected it to everything else. She called it the network, Davis muttered. Apparently she wasn't working alone. 2 aliases just got flagged trying to access Linda's backup server out of state. Federal cybercrime division's tracking it now. Dad stared at the wall. She didn't plan this like a criminal, he said. She planned it like a general. Just then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. A voice digitally masked spoke 3 words. The file lives. Then silence. And a text. A new link. A new timer. 7, 2 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. I showed it to Dad. His face didn't change, but his jaw locked. She left more than just fallout, I said. She left insurance. He nodded slowly. Number, she left a legacy. One she expects someone to finish. And that's when it hit us both at the same time. This wasn't just about revenge. Linda wasn't trying to destroy a family. She was trying to institutionalize manipulation. Build a system where paranoia replaced law. Where control looked like neighborly concern. Where surveillance wore a cardigan and knocked politely at your door. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to rewrite the rules. And she almost did. But now we had the blueprint. And we knew what came next. Because the thing about a manipulation engine is simple. Once you understand how it's built, you can dismantle it. The storm had passed. But what it left behind wasn't silence. It was doubt rooted deep, lingering like smoke after a fire. Maple Street was no longer the suburban postcard it had once pretended to be. Neighbors still mowed their lawns, waved half-heartedly, and took out the trash on Tuesdays. But now, when they looked at each other, it wasn't with casual familiarity. It was with calculated hesitation. Because once you realize you've been watched, recorded, used, you don't just go back to potlucks and pool parties. You start asking yourself things like, how long was she planning this? What did I say that ended up in her database? Who else knew and didn't say a word? The FBI Cyber Division confirmed our worst fear. Linda's network wasn't just local. Her surveillance playbook coded as HOA Sentinel had already been tested in 3 other communities across 2 states. Smaller neighborhoods, tighter trust circles, all manipulated with precision. 52 families had unknowingly participated. 8 lost money. 3 had filed civil suits. 1 couple divorced over accusations planted through Linda's fabricated compliance violations. She didn't just ruin lives, she weaponized trust. Betty resigned from the HOA the next morning. said she couldn't stand the idea of holding a clipboard again. She handed me her keys with tears in her eyes. "I thought I was keeping order," she whispered. Turns out I was just helping her tighten the noose. We told her it wasn't her fault. But guilt doesn't accept logic. The community held a closed-door meeting a week later. No cameras, no press, just 30 people sitting in folding chairs in the community center, eyes red, shoulders heavy. They didn't come for answers. They came for closure and maybe permission to forgive themselves. Dad stood up and spoke first. "You weren't the enemy," he said. "You were the target. The difference matters." He laid out the psychology of Linda's system, how she preyed on routine, manipulated HOA language, exploited fears about property values and safety. "She didn't create your fear," he told them. "She hijacked it." For once, no one interrupted. Then Sam, 12 years old, wiser than he should have had to be, raised his hand. "Do we tell other neighborhoods? The ones she already tried this on?" Dead silence. Then I answered, "We don't just tell them, we teach them." That's how it started. Dad came out of retirement, not to carry a badge, but to carry a message. He built a digital seminar with the Bureau's help. How communities are hacked. Psychological manipulation in everyday governance. It wasn't flashy. No viral clips. No Netflix deals. Just truth. Betty helped build it out. Jennifer helped translate it into Spanish. Tom ran IT support. What Linda broke, we were rebuilding together. Meanwhile, the Bureau tracked the remnants of Linda's network. 2 arrests, 1 warrant pending, and 1 encrypted data vault still untouched, likely her insurance stash. The timer on the new link never restarted. Either it was a bluff or it's still waiting for a trigger we haven't found. Every few weeks, I check it anyway, just in case. Back on Maple Street, changes were slow but real. The HOA was dissolved by vote, replaced with a voluntary council. No fines, no surveillance. Just neighbors who meet once a month and ask a simple question: what do we need? Frank's roses bloomed stronger than ever that spring. Sam won his school civics award for his essay, "How to Spot a Lie with a Smile." I started writing again. Not reports, records. Because some stories don't belong buried in case files. They belong remembered. Not for vengeance. Not for shame. But for prevention, because Linda Ross wasn't a one-time virus. She was a template. And if we pretend we're immune, if we convince ourselves we'd never fall for the same lies, then next time, the clipboard won't be in her hands. It'll be in ours. Peace didn't come back with a parade. It crept in like fog, quiet, fragile, and full of shadows. For weeks after Linda's downfall, the neighborhood walked differently. Quieter footsteps, softer greetings, the kind of politeness that feels rehearsed, like everyone's still waiting for the curtain to drop on some twist ending they didn't see coming. And maybe that was fair. Because even though Linda was gone, her echo hadn't stopped bouncing off our fences, our inboxes, our daily rhythms. You don't dismantle a manipulation engine and expect the gears to stop overnight. Dad knew this better than anyone. He spent mornings in the garden again, same khakis, same wide-brimmed hat, but now he kept the radio on. Classical, mostly. Mozart, Bach, the kind of music that imposes order where silence feels dangerous. Structure helps rebuild the mind, he told me one morning, pruning roses like they'd committed federal crimes. Sam had changed too. Not in some dramatic, scarred for life way, but in the way he asked questions now. Deeper. Slower. Less about what happened and more about why people let it happen. "Do you think anyone else in the world is running another fake HOA?" he asked over cereal one day. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes." He nodded, like he already knew. Betty started a monthly gathering at the community center. Not a meeting, not a council, just space. Coffee, cookies, a potluck table. Nobody was judged for skipping. The only rule was no minutes, no motions, no fines. Just presence. At the second one, Tom stood up and said something I didn't expect from the guy who once brought a folding chair to our arrest. I used to think order meant rules. That if you followed the HOA, you were safe. But Linda followed every rule she wrote and still broke every principle we believed in. He looked at me, then at Dad. "You two reminded me that law and control aren't the same thing." He sat down, and no one clapped. No one had to. Because truth doesn't always need applause. Sometimes it just needs to land. Meanwhile, the Bureau's investigations expanded. What began as a small suburban scandal had cracked open a coordinated fraud ring spanning 6 neighborhoods, 3 states, and over $1.2 million laundered through HOA renovation fees, staged compliance campaigns, and shell consulting contracts. Linda's sentencing hearing was scheduled, though we didn't plan to attend. Not out of anger, not even out of closure, but because, as Dad said, she already took too much of our attention. Let's not give her the rest. Instead, we focused on building something better. The FBI adopted Frank's Sentinel recognition model as part of their training for community liaisons. It wasn't just about catching fraud, it was about identifying the psychological levers used by con artists in positions of localized power. Turns out, the clipboard is more dangerous than the crowbar when it's held with a smile and a seal of authority. Sam started a blog, 12 years old, writing essays with titles like When Safety Becomes Surveillance and Why the Neighborhood Watch Needs a Mirror. His English teacher asked if he had help. He didn't. He just had experience. And me? I finally stopped hiding. Stopped calling myself a consultant. Stopped pretending I could live undercover in a place that needed transparency more than protection. I started teaching. Nota Quantico. Note at some federal task force. Right here. At Maple. I ran sessions in the rec hall, no badges, no bureaucracy. Just straight talk about how to resist manipulation, how to question systems politely, and how to spot when order is being used to cover control. We didn't need another HOA. We needed a culture of accountability. And that's what we were building day by day, one conversation at a time. Then, one Saturday morning, the mail arrived. No return address. Inside was a single envelope, typed, crisp. No smudges. No threats. Just one sentence. Frank, peace is never permanent. It's just the pause between agendas. LR. Dad read it once. Then again. Then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer with the others. He didn't look shaken. Just aware. Because some wars don't end with arrests or verdicts. Some wars end when a community decides they won't be played again. We couldn't guarantee peace forever. But we could promise this. The next time manipulation knocked on Maple Street, it would find the door locked and 20 neighbors standing behind it. It arrived 6 weeks after the sentencing. No envelope this time. Just a small, matte black box. No sender. No postmark. Just our address. Handwritten in the kind of steady cursive that feels practiced. Dad was the one who opened it. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Sam was upstairs, headphones on, oblivious for now. Inside the box was a USB drive and a note. Simple. Precise. Play me once, then burn me, L. Dad and I locked eyes. He didn't speak, but I knew what he was thinking. Linda Ross didn't send messages. She sent moves. We powered up the old air-gapped laptop, the one we kept for exactly this kind of scenario. The screen flickered once, then went black. Then, video. A grainy room, dim lighting, the sound of a faint metronome in the background. Then Linda appeared, not in her curated HOA uniform. No lipstick, no pearls, just a plain black blouse, hair pulled back. And that same eerie composure she'd worn during her trial, like the courtroom, was just another chessboard. Hello again, Frank. I know you've won. On paper, at least. The Bureau has its convictions. The community has its catharsis. But let me be clear, justice is not the same as conclusion. She leaned closer to the camera. Not threatening, just exact. You see, I never expected to win. Not really. Not after what you took from me. But I did expect to outlive your narrative. She paused, then smiled faintly. Every neighborhood has a story. Maple Street's was too clean, too naive. It was ready for someone like me. But Frank, you weren't the only person I studied. My chest tightened. She continued, you aren't even the first. Then the screen changed. Footage began playing different neighborhoods, different HOA groups, different towns. But the pattern was the same. Smiling women in control. Compliance memos, fines, then whispers, then chaos. 7 communities. 3 in states we'd never investigated, 2 with pending lawsuits, 1 where the local newspaper had gone under after running an expose that mysteriously never hit print. What you saw in Maple, Linda's voice returned, was refinement. What you stopped was version 4.6. Dad stood slowly, his fists clenched. Jesus Christ. I was already checking the drive's directories. Nothing else, no folders, no code, just this video. Linda was wrapping up now. I've planted the seed. Not a virus. An idea. One that others more patient, more forgettable can water. You can dismantle my systems, Frank. You can educate your neighborhoods. But ask yourself this. How many other Karens are out there who saw what I built and thought, why not me? She smiled, not smug, triumphant. Power isn't about winning. It's about knowing who's willing to play again after you're gone. Then, static and black. We sat in silence for a long time. Dad eventually reached for the USB, walked it out to the fire pit in the backyard, and dropped it in. No words. Just flame. But it didn't feel like closure. It felt like activation, because Linda Ross had never wanted to end our story. She wanted to make us keepers of the next one. That night, I checked the Bureau database again, quietly, under a burner credential. I searched by anomaly. HOA fines increasing beyond 300%. Anonymous complaints filed in bulk. Presidents with no recorded history 5 years prior. 6 match. No convictions. Yet, and then I realized something else. Her final words weren't a threat. They were a recruitment strategy, a map, a whisper to the next predator in line. Because predators don't vanish. They evolve. And if Linda taught us anything, it's this. The most dangerous ideology isn't built on rage. It's built on repetition. So we got back to work. Not to chase ghosts, but to make sure the next neighborhood would know how to see through the smile behind the clipboard before it was too late. Because peace isn't the reward. It's the warning. This story isn't just about one woman or one neighborhood. It's about how power hides in plain sight, wearing polite smiles and homeowner credentials. It's about the subtle ways control can mimic order, and how easily people will trade freedom for the illusion of safety, especially when that illusion arrives wrapped in rules and rationality. Linda Ross didn't break in through windows. She walked through the front door with a clipboard, a code book, and a perfectly reasonable tone. And that's the first lesson. Not all threats are loud. The most dangerous ones often come dressed as authority, structure, and community values. But the bigger truth is harder to swallow. Linda didn't act alone. Yes, she orchestrated the campaign. But it was the compliance of ordinary people, the silent nods, the blind trust, the failure to ask uncomfortable questions that gave her control. Manipulation thrives where curiosity dies. So here's the real warning. Every neighborhood, office, school board, and small town council is vulnerable to charismatic control wrapped in bureaucracy. Every society has its Linda's people who weaponize process, manufacture consent, and erase dissent through social pressure and administrative force. The key to resisting them isn't rage. It's vigilance. It's critical thinking. It's teaching our kids and reminding ourselves that questioning authority isn't disrespectful. It's responsible. We must train our communities not just to spot lies, but to recognize systems that reward silence. We need to talk to each other. Listen, cross-check, ask, why is this rule here? And who does this policy serve? And above all, we must protect truth, not with force, but with structure. Not just by exposing the manipulators, but by rebuilding the systems they corrupted piece by piece in the light. Because this isn't about one HOA president with a grudge. It's about all of us. And the next time someone like Linda Ross shows up smiling, polished, organized, we'll be ready. Not to attack, but to not fall for it. Because justice isn't the end of a story. It's where awareness begins.